Happy Monday. Welcome to week 7. It's the week of October 19th through the 23rd. We are getting close to the end of our first quarter and we're making progress. I'm proud of you. There's a couple things that we need to look at. We had some birthdays last week. Happy birthday. If I didn't already send you a card, I'm sorry, it's coming in the mail. Here's our to-do list for today. We are working on our Monday folder, watching the lesson, and getting in our graph from last week. So if you didn't already do the graph about climate change, make sure you watch that video. It's in the week 6 folder for, I believe, Monday and Tuesday. And the second one is part 3, I think it is. All right, so top 3 ideas for today. And we're going to change some of our ideas here. The first is that graphs are designed to tell a specific story, influence, or action. Remember, they're a kind of media, right? And so they are looking at being creators, people that make them, intentionally trying to tell stories for us to consume. Our second idea is that by being a smart media consumer, well, what that means is that we need to know what to look for. And then the third idea is that there's a thing called cherry picking. And yes, it does sound like you're going out to pick fruit from a tree, but really, when we apply that to what we're doing, it's when a graph designer shows only certain pieces of data because it makes their story strong. All right, so let's look at these 3 ideas: how graphs are designed to tell a story, how to be a smart media consumer, and what cherry picking is. All right, so here's a graph that looks at the percent of 12th graders who feel left out of things and how that ties into technology. So let's take a look at this graph here. We can see along the x-axis, which is the horizontal axis, it's time, and it represents the time between 2000 and 2007. That was right around when you were born, maybe a little before you were born. Right? So over the course of that year, that's when iPhone was released at the end of 2007. And then if you look up and down the y-axis, this is the percent. So from 0 to 35% of seniors who felt left out of things. So at the beginning of the year 2000, about 30% of seniors felt like they were left out. And then by the end of 2000, when the iPhone was released, that number seems to have dropped to about 25%. So if we're looking at this graph, we can make some assumptions. And the assumption that they're asking us to make is that based on the release of the iPhone, it helped kids feel more connected, less left out. The trend is down. So we need to think about this graph and think about the story that it's telling us, and then put on our thinking caps and ask ourselves, what might we need to look for that's missing? Think about all the things that we've learned about bar graphs, about line graphs. And if we pay close attention to this here, we're looking at only a year. And that's not a lot of data. So let's pull back a little bit and look a little bit more. Cherry picking is when a graph designer only decides to show you a certain snippet, like a little tiny snapshot of the data, right? And what that means is they're picking and choosing the data that serves them instead of showing you the whole picture, right? And the reason they do that is because it helps their cause. So let's look a little bit closer. If I pull way back out instead of looking just at 2006 and 2007, but let's look from 2000 to 2016, which is pretty recent, right? And if we look at the scale here, we can see that it dropped when the iPhone was released, but then the numbers kind of equalized again. And in fact, they went up even more, and they seem to drop. So is this story different than the original graph? It is. So in the original graph, it looks like, man, iPhone is the solution to everything. Everybody's connected. Nobody feels left out. But in reality, that trend changed. And I think what we are seeing is the effect or the impact of technology on society. So let's compare. How can you spot cherry picking here? Well, smart media consumers know that you can mess with the axes of your graph to tell specific stories. And in this case, we're looking at the x-axis, the time axis across the bottom. And if we're only showing a year, that might not be enough time for us to really see the impact that was had. So we're going to zoom out and look here. Okay, so remember, graphs are a form of media. We consume them when we're looking at graphs in the world around us. We can create them to tell stories, to try to influence the way people think and the way they act. And cherry picking is when, as a creator of this media, I only give you a little bit of information because it serves my story better than showing you the whole picture. And to be a smart media consumer, especially a media consumer of graphs, we have to be looking out for when these decisions are being used to maybe manipulate the story.